The chair now recognizes the gentleman from Texas for his 5 minutes of questions.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I would certainly say we got an upgrade. Mr. Conde, in 1967, amendments to the Clean Air Act allowed the federal government to raise preemption for the state of California. While this may have been necessary at the time, your testimony highlights that California's waiver is presently outdated, and I'll say way outdated. Can you explain to what California's current waiver authority impacts the emission standards and regulations in other states, as well as interstate commerce at large?
Yeah, so in 1967, Congress enacted a particular waiver authority that's pretty unique that allows California to set emission standards within its state. But then in 1977, Congress further amended the act to allow other states in the country to adopt California standards. And this in practice means that California has a veto over manufacturer production decisions in about 1/3 of the market, which effectively means the whole national market. So that gives California enormous regulatory authority.
Well, absolutely it does.
Yeah.
And is there something to be said that all of these regulations serve more so to drive the cost of vehicles as well as freight and delivery and fuel higher than it has such a small impact on curbing emissions in a small way? Is that safe to say?
That is very safe to say.
Ms. Ferguson, would you agree with that?
Yes, I would.
Okay, thank you for that. I'm going to come back to you, Mr. Conde, I think is where I'm going next. I have a district along the Gulf Coast of Texas that is home to several key waterways. We have 7 ports, a lot of manufacturing, a lot of refining on the Gulf Coast of Texas. We serve as a lifeline to not only our country's energy export trade, and also import in a lot of things, and import a lot of trade in there in the Gulf Coast of Texas. As such, our inland waterways remain an absolutely crucial linchpin to our nation's transportation sector. Can you explain some of the effect that California emission waivers could have even on ocean-faring vessels?
Yeah, so California has a rule requiring ocean-going vessels to essentially electrify when they stop at the Port of Los Angeles, for example, and the ports in California account for about 40% of the freight moved in the country. So pretty much every ocean-going vessel moves through California, and essentially that requires vessels, even foreign flag vessels, to adopt equipment to electrify that they currently don't have and spend millions of dollars just to dock at the Port of Los Angeles.
And can you imagine the amount of paperwork and the expense from a legal document, whether there's attorneys involved? I think any other attorneys on the panel? Okay, so you're safe right now. So imagine the amount of paperwork that's involved in trying to make sure that all of these other vessels, these companies, whether they're from the United States or they're from, as you pointed out, an ocean flag vessel, rather from across the seas, if you will, what about the amount of expense? What does that do to the price of the goods?
It has a substantial increase in the cost there because it's not just California, but there's also similar European regulations that are out now that are making it extremely difficult to be a global company.
Well, I appreciate that. Ms. Ferguson, I'm coming back to you. Thank you for being here today. You highlighted the significant investment in technological advances in cleaner equipment than motor coaches now utilize. For instance, you mentioned that, quote, since 2000, nitrogen oxide emissions from motor coaches have declined by approximately 98%, which is a significant industry achievement compared to previous decades. However, certain state regulations, talking about California, now we're going to move over to New York City, for example, continue to alter those very standards that y'all are aiming for. What does the future hold for y'all's industry? That's a Texas word, y'all. What does the future hold for y'all's industry if there's no uniformity found with respect to motor coach emissions?
Well, a modern motor coach, you all may not know, it's a $650,000 piece of equipment, highly technological, highly innovative, and not cheap. And to procure vehicles, to manage your fleet, you need significant capital at your disposal. And to deploy your capital, you need long-term certainty. And what's happened, with CARB in California is different engine model year requirements have gotten out of whack, where we have an EPA standard that requires one set of capital expenditure plannings that California, through some of their regulations, have completely changed. And California, similar with shipping, is a huge market for motor coaches.
Okay, I appreciate that. Madam Chair, I yield back.